Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing great. Good morning.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We live in about the two of the more challenging time zones to actually get things working together. But by way of your lovely background there, where are you taking this recording from?
Taking this call from Honolulu, Hawaii. I'm at a killer co-working space called Box Jelly, and they've got a great deck right in the middle of Ward Village with all the high rises. And so I'm taking it outside so that people can get the Hawaii flair.
Not too shabby. Tom, what I'd love to do is figure out for everybody how you ended up getting to work from such a lovely location. So take us back in time a little bit. Where did you go to school and what did you study there? And what was the very first thing you came out to go do?
Sure. Studied at Carnegie Mellon. Graduated with a bachelor's in material science and engineering, which was a focus on metallurgy, ceramics, biomaterials, and then went directly into an MBA. I was probably less interested in like the research element of materials engineering, which was CMU is a very research focused school, and
Right.
more interested in the business applications of science and technology. And so the MBA was my chance to learn more about that.
And
And
so
then I just got
you didn't work between at all. You went straight, literally back to back.
yeah, literally back to back. They had a 3-2 program where top engineering students could go directly onto their MBA fourth year. And so I applied for that and was accepted. I think there was only like 3 or 4 of us that year, and jumped right into the MBA. But I was pretty sure the career in materials engineering wasn't right for me. I had one internship at a U.S. Steel melt shop in Gary, Indiana, for 3 months, pouring heats and standing on top of Coke batteries at 2 in the morning. And I was like, this is a pretty interesting industry, but I'm not sure it's right for me long term. And so the MBA was a chance to pivot out of that into something more tech and software focused.
Got it. Really interesting though. Before we go off that, I'm so curious when you are pursuing something like metallurgy, was there something inside you like you saw people welding or what got you to want to do that? How'd that become a thing for you?
So a bit of a family history. So my family goes back a couple generations in Pittsburgh, and I had a lot of ancestors that worked in the steel mills. And so it was kind of interesting, thinking about the opportunity to learn about steel and metallurgy and, high performance alloys and all of these, really amazing, material structures that are out there, and then study it at a very intense degree at Carnegie Mellon. So I think that's what piqued my interest. And then just wanted to challenge myself to see could I actually complete an engineering degree from CMU and get through all the DiffyQ and Calcul 3D and heat transfer and thermo and all those different things.
Calcin 3D was officially the class that made me stop loving math, by the way. I was like one of those math nerd kids. I did math competitions. I loved it. And then, even linear algebra I found fascinating. And then Calcin 3D showed up and blew my brain, just gone.
Yeah, yeah. And then what's interesting is being in the classroom with people that just get it instantly. And
Yeah.
it's very humbling when you're asking your colleagues for help and they're just like, wait, you don't understand this? Like just instantly? And kind of reminds me of the Jeff Bezos story where he was studying physics and then he decided to pivot into business once he was around all these other physicists that just were operating at 10x whatever he could achieve. So he's like, actually, a business track is probably a good plan for me.
So, okay, now we've met indirectly through Carnegie Mellon or directly through Carnegie
Yeah.
Mellon, but obviously through very, very different journeys. So when you get your MBA, what was the first thing you went off to go do with it?
So I was networking the Pittsburgh startup market, and I met this really interesting company called Capital Technologies. There was a spinoff from the Center for Advanced Fuel Technology at CMU. So it was CMU Tech, and they were commercializing it. And they just raised like $90 million from a major investment bank in New York City. And what they had was a technology that was microwave assisted hydroprocessing. So you could take like refinery bottoms, like the sludge and the really nasty tars and stuff, and then nuke it with microwave energy and break it all down into smaller chain hydrocarbons, which were higher value. And so if you could actually get that to work at scale, that would be super huge in how you would build a refinery, because a big part of the capex of refineries is dealing with the refinery bottoms and figuring out what to do with that. And if you could just apply microwave energy to break it into something more valuable, then that would be hugely impressive. They got it to work at a coffee cup scale at the labs at CMU, went to ExxonMobil, they were able to put together a joint development agreement with ExxonMobil where they said, this is interestingly enough, we want to actually take this through our stage gate process at our lab. And then once they had the JDA with ExxonMobil, went to, I think it was like Merrill Lynch, and they put in a ton of money to fund this company. But it's a funny story. So the interesting part was now that Exxon was going through the stage gate development process that might take 2, 3, 4 years, the executives were wondering, like, okay, we're sitting on $90 million. What are we going to do with this? And this was 2006, 2007, right during the biofuels craze. So they were like, let's build a vertically integrated renewable fuels company. And they started acquiring different pieces of a tech stack and then trying to integrate that together, all unproven technologies, which is like the kiss of death. So, so they were investing in like jatropha plantations in Indonesia, and then waste energy technology to take advantage of the jatropha husks and turn that into power that you could use for a hydrogenation process to take the jatropha oils to turn that into green diesel or biofuels or something. And so they built this tech stack, and they spent all the money, and then they went back for project financing in 2008, right when the mortgage crisis hit, and there was all the shakeups with the investment banks, and one of the other investment banks acquired the smaller bank, and we went to ask for additional financing, and they said, well, what did you do with the $90 million? And no, you're not getting any more money.
And so what were you doing there, though?
I was doing like spreadsheet analysis. So we were doing process and technical analytics of all these different technologies and saying, okay, if we could get these different things to work, what would a project actually look like from an NPV perspective? Would it be economically feasible? What did inputs look like when there was variability on the inputs? How did that impact the overall outputs, the overall equations? And kind of like doing the analysis behind these kind of like risky bets.
So I'm so curious, given the world we're in today, did you have a job that today you could do through prompting?
Yes, I think so. Because I think what we were doing was trying to make sense of unstructured data and tying things together in a spreadsheet. And then I think with the prompting, you could have it do scenario analysis and like add variability. And one of the things that I was doing that was interesting were these things that called tornado plots, where you would take individual variables and then you would modify them either 1, 2, or 3 sigma to the left and 1 or 2, 3 sigma to the right, and then see how it would impact the overall output, whether that would be kind of like the energy balance of the equation or the economic result. And then so much would just swing on the price of crude in terms of whether projects were economically feasible. And then also depending on where you were sourcing like the local electricity. Like we had it in at the landfill in Dubai. So it was like the Dubai metropolitan landfill, and they flew us out there because we were thinking, okay, we need a feedstock. So let's go somewhere where they have like a ton of waste that we could turn into energy using a waste energy workflow. And what they were doing is they were taking like the 10% of plastics that were recyclable, and then they would take the rest of the waste and make it into this giant cube that would be like 8 foot by 8 foot by 8 foot cube, and then they would go out in the desert and bury it.
Whoa!
So we're like, that's amazing. That'd be a great waste, a source of fuel for us. But then we went out there and found out whatever electricity we would make would still not be price competitive with their main power source, which was through diesel generation, which was highly subsidized by the government.
Got it.
So like, even if you have the waste doesn't mean that it would work out. So
did you have a job after that 90 million? Did the company stay around, or what happened?
No. So the company ran out of money. I distinctly remember, I was at an office building in Wexford outside of Pittsburgh, and my manager came over that morning and he said, just stop working. Just stop working. I'm like, what do you mean just stop working? He's like, I can't give you any specifics, but just stop working. I'll take you out to lunch. Let's go out to lunch. And so then we went out to lunch at like a little Mexican place down the street. And he told us when we went back that afternoon that we were all going to be let go because the company didn't have enough in the bank to reasonably keep us on as employees. And so then we went back and we were terminated, and then I had to find something else to do.
All right. So you're in your mid-20s, you got your MBA, you've had your first job, you've had your first layoff. You're at the height of the 2008 mortgage crisis, it sounds like, and which wasn't great for tech either.
Yeah.
What did you set out to do?
I wanted to take a little bit of time off, and I needed a project, so I decided to train for an Ironman. And so that summer, My family had a little cottage outside of Pittsburgh, and I went to live there. And I trained for my first Ironman. It was 2009. And so it's just a lot of swimming, a lot of biking, a lot of running. And I was able to complete that in September, and then came back to Pittsburgh and started networking again. And Booz Allen Hamilton was building an energy practice in Pittsburgh. And the director's name was Gary Leatherman, and he was a Carnegie Mellon guy, and he was trying to find Carnegie Mellon engineers and people with some business chops to come help staff up his new team. Okay. And we would be working with the National Energy Technology Lab, which was the one fossil fuels lab south Pittsburgh that was doing like efficiency research and some like life cycle assessments and different things for the Department of Energy. And so he brought me on, and I was at Booz Allen for 2 years.
And what'd you do from there?
So one of my mentors at CMU, his name was Tom Emerson, and he said after graduating, he's like, if you don't really know what you want to do, I would encourage you to work for a small company for a few years and then leave and work for a big company for a few years. And then you'll have a better spectrum of types of job experiences that are out there. And so I kind of thought like that first energy company was my first small company experience. And then Booz Allen was my big company experience. And the thing about big companies is you can work on larger projects, but everything just moves so much slower.
Sure.
And you're not able to wear as many hats. And I really love the opportunity to learn a lot about a lot of different things. And so after being there for 2 years and writing some papers and assisting some like research projects, kind of realized that maybe that wasn't the best fit for me long term. And it always kind of had this dream of chasing a startup. And so I met this guy named Mike Ressler, who had built this cool software for integrating statistics in video for high school sports. And he was calling it StatEasy, and it was being used by volleyball coaches. And what was cool is if, the local statistician that's taking stats at every game, it timestamps all the stats. And if you do raw video throughout the game, at the end of the game, if you integrate the two and sync it, you can use the statistics as metadata to break down the video. So like you can automatically create highlight reels, you can view all the kills, you can view all the blocks, you can view all the sets, like from a volleyball perspective. And I was like, this is really cool. Like this, you could turn this into a media platform in terms of automatically generating content for maybe like high school football or high school basketball or top 10 lists or like, television broadcasts. And what would you think about like trying to chase this opportunity together? And he thought that sounded like a pretty cool opportunity. So we joined forces, left Booz Allen, and we got in the Innovation Works ecosystem in Pittsburgh with a bunch of the awesome people there, which got us our first funding. I think it was like $300,000 to start working on this full time and then kind of build out a team. And so that was the next project from, for the next 3 or 4 years was building out this kind of new media startup that was trying to be Facebook meets ESPN meets YouTube for high school sports in Pittsburgh.
Got it. This is really interesting to me because you went from somewhere that started sort of very physical to something that becomes all digital media, et cetera, although there is a real world tie-in there. Were you at any point tied to the vertical? Did you care that you were in originally metallurgy, now media, et cetera? Or is it more working on interesting stuff? What was driving you more?
I think it was more, working on interesting stuff, trying to take advantage of, the best opportunities that came along. I'm definitely more of a generalist than a specialist. So like if I was a specialist and I was coming out of the materials engineering program at Carnegie Mellon, I would have gone on for a master's and then a PhD, and I would be like a world leader in like semiconductor manufacturing or thin films. Or I think being more of a generalist, like I had my bachelor's and that was interesting, but I really wasn't so interested in it that I wanted to continue down that pathway as the end goal. And I'm also very extroverted. So like I need to be around people, and that's what energizes me and drives me. And so I remember a distinct story in one of my engineering courses at CMU where people were talking about what they wanted to do after school. And someone said, I just can't wait until I'm in my basement with my scanning electron microscope, my basement lab with my scanning electron microscope by myself with my samples and the windows are drawn and I'm just able to do my research 12 hours a day, 5 or 6 days a week. And that'll just be heaven. And I was like, that sounds like hell to me.
That's not my heaven either, my friend, but I could get it. If you're into that research, I could get that.
Yeah.
What was starting to form for you?
Yeah. So I guess that was the signal that, okay, like materials engineering as a specialty is not going to be my bag, but the application of technology and science to solve problems to help people like that's something that would be more akin to what drives me and what charges me. And then the thing about CMU that was interesting too was like being exposed to entrepreneurs for the first time. Like I grew up in rural Pennsylvania. My dad was a professor. We had somebody in the family who was a small business owner who had like a construction company, but I'd never been exposed to like entrepreneurs or people that had been successful in software and tech. And now I'm in classes where all the lecturers have like done really cool things, and they have really cool stories, and they've been at the cutting edge of different technologies and movements, and they've had successes and they've had failures. And I think that was kind of my first exposure to like, oh, what would this like, life of tech and entrepreneurship kind of look like? And that's why I decided to try to go work for the alternative energy company, and then tried my hand at the big company life, and that didn't really work. And then tried my own hand at a startup. And the end goal of, what happened with StatEasy was we raised a small seed round in Pittsburgh, like 1.2 million, some small VC, some angels, some economic development money. But we really didn't get to product market fit. Like we had some good case studies and it worked at a very small scale, but we couldn't scale it out. So yeah, I had to move on from that project and find other things to do.
All right. And so you've now had your first startup not work out. We've all had them. I don't know if I know anyone in the startup game who's not had a failure along the way, but if you're out there, more power to you.
Yeah.
Was there a point where did that fuel you to do the next one? Did that make you want maybe a little more security, big company land? What did that process sort of give you?
It was very humbling. I think because I think my belief in my abilities was probably beyond my abilities at that point. And so like having that reset is very important early in your career. And so like it had potential. Like we weren't able to deliver on the product promises that we were trying to make. We were boiling the ocean. We were trying to do too much. Classic first time founder mistakes. We should have really focused on like a very small problem and solved that problem and grew it into something. And then it was a much more competitive market, like things were heating up. There was this other platform called Huddle based in Nebraska that raised $50 million to get in Western PA. We really only had like a 12-month window to win before they were going to take over. And then we failed and they took over. After that failed, I really wanted to move to Silicon Valley and try to get in early with people that knew what they were doing so I could get closer to success and success patterns. So I loaded up everything I owned in my car, my Toyota Corolla, and drove across the country. And
roughly how old were you at the time?
I was probably, that was 2014, so I was 31.
Okay. And did you feel like that was were you reinventing, or was this just sort of the next step?
It was kind of the next step. I wasn't really so much as a reinvention because I was looking to stay in tech and stay in startups and stay in software and get into something that was hot. It was definitely the willingness to like step back and just find a project that was doing well and kind of push a broom for somebody to be close to success versus being on the outside looking in.
And then I had how long were you in the Bay Area, and what'd you do while you were there? Because you're halfway now from Pittsburgh to Hawaii.
Drove across the country, landed in the Bay Area 2014. One of my mentors in Pittsburgh, Ned Renzi from Birchmere Ventures, said, let me introduce you to some people when you land in San Francisco. And he connected me to Manu Kumar, who from Canine Ventures, who's also a legend at Carnegie Mellon.
Who I went to undergrad with.
Oh, really?
Uh-huh.
Oh, that's awesome.
Back when he was doing that, that's when he did his sneaker net.
Yeah.
Back then.
Yeah. Sneaker labs. And then he ended up going to California, starting Canine Ventures, coining the term pre-seed investing. He was the OG pre-seed investor. It was first money in Twilio, first money in Carta, first money in Lyft. Did very well as an investor and was at the time working with a company called eShares. And so I meet him at his incubator space in Palo Alto. It was empty space, and he pulls out a folding chair, and I sit under a folding chair on the other side, and we chat for a half hour. And he's like, yeah, you're pretty cool. Let's see what you're interested in. I got two companies for you. One is a company that's doing like high definition photography for restaurants, for menus, to like improve the digital menu application. And the other is this company called eShares that's working on cap tables. And I said, cap tables. I know cap tables because when I was at StatEasy, I was the one managing the cap table and managing the safes and the node conversion calculations and all the modeling. And that was an absolute pain in the ass. So like a software platform that would solve that problem, could be pretty cool. And they just closed the Series Seed. They were just almost to a Series A. And he said, let me connect you to the founder, Henry Ward, to see if there's something you can do to help. And so he introduced me to Henry. And Henry said, we're at 11 people and we're looking for someone to help manage the 409A valuations product offering. Because at this point, they were basically just a cap table platform. They were issuing options. They were issuing electronic certificates. And they had built this tool where you could request a 409A valuation, which would update the fair market value of your options so you could issue more stock to employees. So it's a valuation you need every 12 months. Or if you have a material event, like a new funding round, you need one earlier. And they created this 409A request form. When people request a valuation, they had third parties doing the report. And the volume was increasing such that he's like, I just need someone to be the ops manager to like hold this together and build this out while we figure out what to do. I said, sure, anything. Like, let me get in with, a company that's doing something cool and I will push a broom.
So the priority for you when you went to the Bay Area, the priority was really find something else exciting to be part of for at least your next step.
Yeah.
And so how long did you stay there for?
And I was there for 4 years. I was a 12th employee. Was there through 1,000 people.
Wow.
I was ops manager, then moved over to sales, then became a sales manager, then was VP of sales, private markets team, and at the peak, had like 20 reps under me and like 15 SDRs in San Francisco and Salt Lake City. And then they went through a national search to find who was going to be, taking the revenue org to the next level. And they brought in Jeff Perry from Oracle, who's the current CRO. So I was taught by the CRO who's still there. And Carta now has 2,000 employees. If you go to New York, the New York office is one whole floor of the One World Trade Center. It's the 83rd floor. Crazy. So I got to go there last summer for Tech Week, when we were hanging out. And it's one of those situations where you have to like change elevators halfway up because there isn't an elevator that will go all the way to the top. So you have to go to like the 64th or 65th floor, get off the elevator bank, get on the second round of elevators and go all the way up. And you open the door and it's just the Carta floor and you walk over the windows and it's just New York. And it's just like one of the coolest things in the world. Seeing that, like when I was there, we all fit around one conference room table in Palo Alto in California. And now it's 2,000 people globally. We have an office in Abu Dhabi. We have an office in Singapore. We have an office in London. I think they're at like 500 million in ARR, like 10% free cash flow on like $1 billion raised. So like it was a classic venture play. They just raised a ton of money to build this out.
You've done something I've never been a part of. I have other friends who have done similar. You were at a company as number 12 and saw 1,000 people get hired around you, above, below, nearby, etc. What was that like to go through that in a few words? Like, what was it like for you? Were you amazed to see people walking through the doors? Could you feel the rocket ship energy? What was that like?
It was energizing. It was just super powerful as we were creating new offices. And this was like at the very early stage of Zoom being a thing too. So Henry would create these Zoom portals between offices. So you could always walk over and like ask questions into the other office, just like you were standing there in real life. And at some point, it didn't really scale. And the company turned on Henry and said, we need to get rid of these portals because the GC walking over, yelling to try to get the CFO from one office to the other is disruptive for everybody else that was there.
How about on the flip, though? If you have the opportunity with a startup of yours down the road and you're on that rocket ship, is there a thing that you witnessed happening that you are like, I'm going to do that wherever I get the chance?
Well, what was special about Carta at the time was it was still very much an in real life company where we were all together in Palo Alto and then we built an office in San Francisco and then we hired a guy in Seattle to lead the valuations team and we built an office in Seattle and we were trying to get people together as much as possible. And then with Zoom, we were trying to get FaceTime. But now with so many more like remote first companies, and then with the advent of LLMs, people are more distributed and you don't need as much headcount as you did back in the day. So I mean, Carta is doing a lot with LLMs and agentic workflows. And if all those tools were available 10 years ago, would we need 1,000 people? Would we need 2,000 people? Probably not. Like we would have topped out at a couple hundred, and we just have all these like super AI orchestrators that are managing all the agents that are doing all the work. So it really was a special time where Henry and the management team was trying to get people together in person as much as possible. We do like a Carta camping trip every summer.
Oh, nice.
To try to like, develop relationships across functions. And, we're taking a bunch of software engineers that have never been camping out to Tahoe or the American River and taking them rafting. And so everybody's going through this experience together for the first time. And so I'm really grateful that I was there at that time, but it also was very stressful. It was a grind. And, Henry Ward was a very challenging guy to work for. He's very much like a 0 to 1 or 0 or 1 binary Peter Thiel type guy. And so there was a lot of like changeover at the management level that would be unexpected because he was a hire fast, fire fast mentality. Like he liked to get people on to give them a chance. And then if it wasn't working out, he would cut them overnight and then we wouldn't see them again. And so everyone was always kind of worried, like, is that going to be me? Because they could see how special the company was and you wanted to be a part of it and hold on as long as you could. And so I'm very proud that I was there for 4 years, but it was really tough.
What is your thoughts on that? I tend to be a little bit more giving of people. I tend to give at least an extra shot, like, oh, I think they'll have learned from this, etc. Some people don't think that. It like Henry was. It's get rid of him. I'm curious how you come down on that.
I think in a growth scenario, like hire fast makes sense. But then I think if we had just slowed down hiring a little bit, we could have probably done a better job of like hiring people that actually had a long-term potential with the company and have like more structure in terms of, what we were doing with HR and recruiting and interviewing. Like a lot of that was pretty haphazard in the beginning until we brought in like specialists that would help out.
Got it.
And I think it is a little bit disruptive with a fire fast mentality for the rest of the team in terms of, am I really going to be here next week? Who knows? Do I need to have my resume polished and up and running? Should I have some like irons in the fire? It's a little bit counterproductive, but it's like he would always talk about the Detroit Red Wings as his example, like sports team. He's like, I want to operate like a hockey team where I'm constantly changing lines and I'm bringing in new players and I'm cutting players. And I think there's a lot of positives to that, but then there's a lot of like negatives as well.
And are you a Penguins fan? Like, how did you respond?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Okay. As a Habs fan, as a native Habs fan, I'm on board with all this. Okay, so let's fast forward a little. Let's move ahead. Something got you from eShares to Hawaii. Oh, so okay. Obviously you moved there, but I'm just curious, was that in any way related to your career, or was that just a place you wanted to live? How'd you get there?
So I met a girl when I was at eShares. It turned into Carta. There was this awesome software engineer named Christine Perry who was working in tech at places like Optimizely and Mixpanel and whatnot. And we moved in together in San Francisco, and we got married. We bought a house in Oakland and started having kids. Over COVID, during the pandemic, Hawaii was kind of our escape. To get out of California, we'd go to the Big Island, Maui, Oahu, and we just fell in love with this small town in Oahu called Kailua. And like literally, the kids bike to school, and the elementary school kids, where they'll have a bike train where one adult will go pick up all the kids. And so you'll see like an adult bike and then 6, 7, 8 BMX bikes and then another adult bike that's the caboose. And we were just like, man, that would be really cool, like to give that experience to our kids. And we kind of felt like our chapter in the Bay Area was coming to a close. It's a great place to be when you're a young professional, but it's a really hard place to like start a young family.
Same reason we left, by the way. Same thing. Once you're whether you're driving them around, whatever, great town, but not super kids in school oriented.
Yeah. Same thing. So we made the jump 3 years ago. We're like, all right, we're working, remote for tech companies, and let's hop over to Oahu. And it's been awesome. We got pregnant. We had a second girl. So my girls, I've got a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and they get to play outside during the day, and we get to go to the beach, and they're great at swimming, and mommy and daddy work, and then and they just get to like appreciate the ocean and everything that Hawaii has to offer. And when I talk to people about Hawaii, they're like, the people are friendly, the climate's amazing, and the rates of violent crime are super low. So like it just feels a lot safer than where we were in the Bay Area. And so it's like, just takes one stressor away.
You're living in gorgeous Hawaii. You're married, you've got kids, you've done well off your work so far, and you and your wife decide we're going to do our own startup together against everybody's advice. we're going to, while you have little kids, against everybody's advice, while not living in the Bay Area, against everybody's advice. How did that decision come to be?
So my wife is a software engineer, full stack, plus design, plus AI. Like she's absolutely brilliant. And we were just like, it'd be really cool to try to start a company together. People were starting these like micro SaaS platforms where if it's just a few people and you get to a few $1 million in ARR, like, that's manageable versus like a big venture backed platform like what we experience at Carta or Optimizely or Mixpanel or that type of track. And what was happening with AI and LLMs was super interesting. Like we were right on the cusp of people building these agentic workflows. And we had a little bit of a background in marketing tech and then my working on the sales org at Carta. And we were thinking like, let's build some agentic workflows to assist revenue orgs and B2B SaaS organizations. And we got into the Carnegie Mellon Venture Bridge, which was awesome, where we got connected with Jeremy and the rest of the crew. Our powers combined could probably do something pretty cool because I'm not the product builder. Like I will always need someone to build cool things for me and I can go do the growth thing and go to market. And Christine really loves the tinkering and the prototyping and like making something elegant and beautiful and like stressing about the button size and color and everything. And so we're kind of like diametrically opposite sides of the coin, the venture coin. And we're like, maybe we should try something together. And we were packaging these tools together in different ways. We didn't have a real concrete vision of this is specifically what we're going to do from the beginning. We were kind of thinking we go through the iterative process, work with some early customers, and kind of the vision would present itself. And then I think we ran into the same problems that a lot of other kind of like AI companies run into, is that if you slide into the general space, the opportunity is too big and you're not focused enough to like really gain a foothold. And so we have some initial users that were like, yeah, okay, it's working, but it's not like life changing. And we clearly didn't have product market fit, and we weren't able to iterate enough cycles to get to product market fit before we needed to make a change.
Sure. As my startup, we're at a mixed point on product market fit with our direct onboarded enterprise customers. So people that we've spent a lot of time with and train their whole staff, we have close to a zero churn. However, with rando direct signups, product-led growth, really, really problematic still for us. And we know why at this point, because we're in a space that is so ill-defined that people come to our site looking for a tool that we don't offer, and like an AI video is so nebulous. But where I want to take that, what are your thoughts on, to your point around time you need to establish product market fit in the AI space these days? Because I think, all those prior lessons are probably done, I think. So I'm having just gotten to the point where you are, and we're still looking at like, how do we solve all these problems? How do you think about that right now?
Well, all the time, the normal timelines are completely thrown out the window. I mean, you think about some of these tools that are going from 0 to 10 million in ARR in less than 12 months, let alone the ones that are going from 0 to $100 million in 8 months. Like, it's just absolutely ridiculous. If you're able to, have a clear ICP, a clear like value prop, have it work, have it scale from like a PLG motion, so you don't have to staff up on like headcount or sales orgs, and then it just blows up.
Well, let's talk about that clear ICP. I think I like where you started that. It's a really good statement. I would surmise, again, sort of just riffing, that in 2025 and beyond, that definition of ICP will have to get more and more narrow, is my current hunch, right? Because I look at what we do, and generically, I'd say most of our users are like social media managers, but there are also creative directors and ad sales people and et cetera. And I don't think that's going to fly by next year. I think by next year, it's social media managers for whatever enterprise companies that make X, Y, Z. What are you seeing changing in that regard?
Well, I think, with any kind of decision, you have your technical user and you have your economic decision maker. And I think the AI is replacing the technical user. And so you have to get to the economic decision maker as soon as possible so that they're allocating budget towards your agentic workflow versus additional headcount. And so I love like following Jason Lemkin from SaaStr, because he's rolling out a lot of AI tooling and has completely rewrote his stack in the last 6 months. And he talks a lot about how his life has changed, where 80% of his life day to day is now just managing these workflows. It's doing additional training on the models. It's getting prompts set up and having things run, and then checking results to see like what if it's high quality, what if it's low quality. And then the next day you do it all over again with additional points of training data, and you have things run again. So totally the ICP is going to be shifting up market to the people that are controlling budgets and less the people that are doing the work, because the people that are doing the work, the new work is going to be managing all these AI agents and doing the orchestration. And they're going to be doing the heavy lifting.
The question of who does the work is becoming very quick, is about to be, is it an agent that does the work, or is it a human does the work? Or is it a human with various agents and then varying degrees, right? And I think, anyone who's gotten really good at using in the past few years of thinking, how might I use like Upwork to make my life, job, et cetera, easier, right? I think that's a good mentality for what's coming now. Like, I'm already in the, should this be an agent? Should this be an app? Should this be a product, right? I'll give you an example. I was talking with someone who does economic development for Westchester County, and she was saying it would be great if her founders had a tool to vet their own ideas. And my mind's now in is that a really good prompt? Is that an agent that can do a lot of work for you as a prompt? Or is that potentially a web app that you build in Lovable or Replit or something like that?
That's the question everybody's asking.
Yeah. So, okay. So where are you spending your time these days?
Okay. So, wife and I were working on this agentic AI project. We weren't able to get meaningful funding, so we decided to wind it down, return what little money we raised to the angel investors that backed us, which we're grateful for their support. And then my wife landed at a Web3 project based in Dubai, and I landed at a Web2 project based in Kentucky, opposite ends of the world. And then the project I'm working with is called Forecastr, and they're building an operating system for FP&A teams, so financial planning and analysis teams for startups, a lot of B2B SaaS platforms, some hardware, some robotics, because a lot of them, their forecast or their financial model still lives in a spreadsheet. And there's a ton of value to be gained by moving that spreadsheet into a web app. And then you have all the different automations and the data enhancements and the scenario planning analysis. And then you can tie it to your accounting system. Like once you actually have funding and you're moving forward, you can do budget reconciliation, like actual versus budget amounts. And then they're playing with AI and LLMs on top of that data set to help people educate themselves about what the FP&A function is, and helping people go through scenarios of how should they raise, what should the valuation be, what should the terms be, how much should I raise, how far will it get me, when should I hire this next person. And we're at about the 8 or 49 employees, 15 million raised, just hit about 3 million in ARR, and we'll probably be gearing up for a Series A later this year. So it's a exciting time to be with this company. It reminds me a lot of Carta's early days, where Carta was taking spreadsheet data or cap table data out of spreadsheets and putting in a web app, and we're taking finance data out of spreadsheets and putting it in the web.
It sounds like a very natural build on where you spent your time. Now, compared to joining this versus running your own shop with your wife, I mean, are obviously incomparable experiences. So I'm not asking for that, but are you finding this as a great next step on your journey, or would you rather be just designing all your own stuff?
I think I'd rather be with a winning team. Like if my wife and I weren't able to iterate and find something that was going to win, like I'm totally fine going to work for another set of founders that actually have something with legs. Yeah. Because it's better to be a part of like a long-term win, because you get the exponential gains versus being part of a slow, like zombie type company. And the reason I wanted to join Forecastr is I had met the founders, Stephen and Logan, maybe 5 years ago. They were picking my brain about what worked at Carta, and they wanted to apply that to Forecastr. And I got on their investor updates list. So I've been getting monthly updates for the last 5 years. And they're very smart. They operate with integrity, with authenticity. And they've been through 5 years of product development cycles to get them where they are today. And so I reached out to them and I said, I really respect, you guys and what you've built and how you operate. And if there was something I could do to be helpful, like I would jump at the opportunity to join your project. And they said, yeah, we would totally find a seat for you on this rocket ship. And it's like Sheryl Sandberg's story about Mark Zuckerberg. It's like when you're given a seat on a rocket ship, you just take it. You don't argue about which seat it is.
I love that.
Because the outsized gains are just so much on the winner. So it's better to pick a winner than to be the captain of a loser.
I love that kind of thinking. I think the locking your mentality in around winningness, I think is so, so huge. We talk about, my co-founder and I talk about this all the time, is when you're having kind of a stretch of whether it's good or mediocre or bad, finding ways to make wins happen along the way is so, so important, right? Because you're right. Any given team could have wins in one way and none in another. So I think that that's such a good mentality. So given that you're sort of mid-career, you've had a lot of success, you've probably got a lot more success ahead of you. How do you define success now?
I think I define success as being a part of a team that has potential, that operates with integrity, authenticity, intelligence, very high functioning, kind of like the sports team mentality that Henry Ward used to use at Carta, but maybe less of a hire fast, fire fast way of operating.
Give people a little bit of a safety net that they might not lose their job every given day.
Yeah. Give people a little bit of a safety net. It's so hard to reproduce the Carta experience. So it's like that really was a once in a lifetime thing just to be there for that span, like 12 people to 1,000 people. So I'm trying not to chase the dragon too much in terms of comparing everything against that, because I'll never really be able to duplicate that again, but I can help create magic with a different team in a different space with a different kind of product offering. And so I'm trying to be rational about, hopefully I'll have some other, big wins. It's hard to hit, multiple home runs, but I think, if I can get some more triples and doubles, I can still get in the Hall of Fame or at least get a note somewhere.
I love that
way.
But
yeah, and honestly, it'd be awesome to be able to do something with my wife at some point, because we could turn it into a family business. I have 2 girls that are going to grow up. My wife can teach them how to code. I'll teach them how to sell. They could go to school and be entrepreneurs right out of school. Like I remember, this is all new for me, like going to college at CMU, like I was in a tax class and somebody said, does anybody know the difference between taxes on income and capital gains? And the kid from California said, yeah, 14% and 40%. And I was like, he knew what it was. He knew what the number was. And like, how did you know that? He's like, oh, my mom's a VC.
There you go.
Like, of course I know that. Like, so like we could be that for our kids in terms of helping them level up. And so I think my wife and I both like the vision of being in tech, being in venture, doing some investing, teaching our girls everything that we've learned, and then helping them run with whatever projects they choose to work on in the future.
Tom, that's wonderful. If you want to take a moment to send people somewhere, whether that's to Forecastr or anything else on the internet, where would you have them go?
I would say check out Forecastr. If you're a startup and you're fundraising or you need to get smart about finance function, the macroeconomic wave is people don't have budget for in-house finance hires because you need to focus on building, you need to focus on selling. And so there's this new market of kind of FP&A tools that are growing. And then what's really cool about Forecastr is you get a human paired with the software service to do the full onboarding and the monthly check-ins, and we can help with all of your board reporting and your investor reporting and help you raise that round that you need. And we're used by 500 growth startups backed by leading investors, all the way from Andreessen to Excel to Google Ventures, Founders Fund. And we would love to support others too. So message me if you want to learn more about Forecastr and how we can help your business.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Great chatting with you today. Enjoy lovely, lovely Hawaii, as I'm sure you will. And thanks again for giving us your time.
Thanks, Jeremy. I really appreciate your leadership and creating this amazing podcast experience for people that have some stories to tell. And thanks for having me on. It was really an honor.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Have a great one.